Let's do it. Because I don't know about you, but I've had enough of the middlemen between me and God. I don't need a priest. I don't need a bishop. I don't need some man in a robe telling me what my soul's allowed to feel. And neither do you. Religion, in its purest form, was supposed to bring us closer to the divine. But instead, it built walls, not bridges, not ladders, walls. And behind every wall, a gatekeeper, a translator, a holy man with a book in one hand and a donation plate in the other. That's not God, that's a club. And the more I've walked my own path, the more I've realized most religions don't free you, they own you. They sell you a version of God that's behind velvet ropes and velvet robes. You want to meet him? Gotta rise in the ranks. You want to get closer to Source? Join the order. Get the title. Climb the fucking pyramid. And when you finally make it to the top, surprise, there's some egomaniac there guarding the very last door. You're not ready yet. No, I am ready. I've been ready. I'm doing this episode because I've lived this battle. I've been the kid who wanted to believe. I've been the man who burned it all down to find the truth. I've stared into the eyes of people who say they serve God, but all I saw was control, secrets, judgment, and ego. I've had friends get lost in cults. I've watched family chase the illusion of holiness while ignoring the actual light in front of them. And I've watched countless good people, people like you and me, give their power away to men who never deserved it. So today, we're talking about it. The priest class, the hierarchy, the game of spiritual gatekeeping, and how the very thing that was supposed to bring us closer to God might have been the thing that kept us from ever really knowing him. So the first thing I want to talk to you about today is the priest class pyramid. Let's talk about it. From the dawn of civilization, Sumer, Egypt, Babylon, you start seeing the same pattern. A few guys figure out how to read the stars, how to track eclipses, maybe how to predict a flood or two. And boom, they're suddenly the mouthpieces of God. They stop being curious students of the cosmos, and they start calling themselves intermediaries. Quote, "Don't talk to God, we'll do that for you." And just like that, you're on the outside. So what do they do next? They build a system. Ranks, robes, rituals, degrees, titles, theological seminaries. You ever notice how spiritual power, actual radiant spiritual presence, isn't what moves people up the ranks? It's fucking paperwork. Oh, you've got a master of divinity? You're qualified. Meanwhile, there's some barefoot saint with no credentials, holding real light, but nobody listens to them. Why? Because the system doesn't reward real connection to God. It rewards loyalty to the institution. This is why I didn't believe in God for most of my life. And once you buy into that system, you're taught to climb. Become a deacon. Move up to elder. Get ordained. Suddenly, it's not about God. It's about status. About impressing other people who are playing the exact same game as you. You're not praying anymore. You're performing. And here's where the ego trap snaps shut. I'm closer to God than you because I've climbed higher up the ladder. Let that sink in for a second. That's not love. That's not faith. It's not holy. That's spiritual capitalism. The truth? God doesn't care how many ladders you climbed. He doesn't care if your collar's white, your robe is black, or your title starts with Reverend Highmost. God's looking you right in the face and asking, can you see me without looking up? If your whole identity is built on hierarchy, you've already missed the point. And this priest class system, it doesn't just exist in Christianity. You'll find it in every major religion. Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, even Hinduism. Doesn't matter how different their gods are, their power structures all look the same. A pyramid. A fucking pyramid. Religion is a pyramid scheme. The earliest, the most powerful. And your soul is stuck somewhere near the bottom. So the question is, are you here to climb the Tower of Babel again? Or are you ready to walk straight into the garden without a guide, without a script, without permission? Just you and the divine, face to face. I think you're ready. I think we all are. Part 2, the barrier to God. All right, let's get into it. Because this part right here, this is what they really do not want you to know. The greatest trick religion ever pulled was making you believe that you needed someone else to get to God. That you couldn't understand the scriptures unless someone translated it for you. That divine wisdom was too complicated for a regular person. That without a priest, a monk, a rabbi, or a sheik, you'd be lost. Bull fucking shit. That's the barrier. And it's not holy. It's weaponized literacy. The Bible wasn't written in Latin for fun. It was written in Latin so you couldn't read it. So only a special class of sanctioned individuals could interpret it for you. And more importantly, decide which parts you were allowed to know. And that's not unique to Christianity. Buddhism plays this game too. Some monk drops a cryptic parable, vague as hell. And when you ask what it means, you must meditate on it, my child. Meanwhile, they've got the full script locked in some temple, passing it down like a sacred inheritance. It's not that you're not ready. It's that they don't want to give it to you. Because then, you wouldn't need them anymore. Then the temple goes empty. The donations dry up. The hierarchy collapses. Because if God is accessible to everyone, then nobody is special. And they need to feel special. They need to feel chosen, elite, enlightened. But let me tell you something. God doesn't whisper in riddles. God speaks in sunsets, in music, in tears, in silence. And you don't need a translator for any of that. You don't need a sacred language or secret handshake to feel source pouring through your chest like lightning. So why make it so complicated? Power. Because if I can convince you that I am the only one who truly understands God, you will follow me. Fund me. And that's the important one. Fund me. You will fear me and defend me. Even when I betray you. Even when I hurt you. Even when I put myself between you and your own Creator. And that is what all of this comes down to. Access. Who gets to talk to God? Who gets to be trusted with truth? And the truth is, it's always been you. You were always allowed. They just needed you to think you weren't ready, so they could keep the gates closed and keep the keys in their hands. Part 2.5, the lie of Latin, the invented language of the priest class. Now, hold up. Before we move into scandals and shadows, let's take a minute and zoom in on something that's been quietly bothering me for fucking years. Latin. I'm an English major. I have studied our language and the foundations of it all of my life. The so-called sacred tongue of the Western Church, the language of popes, priests, theologians, and scholars. Here's the thing. There is no solid evidence Latin was ever a naturally spoken language. The records of it being used come from religious institutions, the same ones hoarding truth, the same ones rewriting our history, the same ones standing between you and God. So, what if Latin isn't ancient at all? What if it's an invention? A fabricated code built from fragments of older languages: Venetian, Gaelic, Phoenician, Etruscan, Dacian. There's a few terms today that I'm going to be using, and I may be pronouncing them wrong because I generally haven't heard anybody say these things out loud. Mostly, I've read these in books, so forgive me if I mispronounce anything. But all of these older languages have been tied together with a priestly glue. They created Latin not to liberate thought, but to control it. Created to feel sacred, but just foreign enough to keep the average soul feeling unworthy of translation. And who were the Venetians, really? The red-haired seafarers? The traders? The language bearers? They've been called Phoenicians, Atlanteans, Sea Peoples, Druids, Aryans, Scythians, Tartarians, Hyperboreans. Every era gives them a new name because every era has tried to erase them because they carried something too powerful: the original language, the tongue of creation, not just phonetics, vibration, intention, magic. A language that could heal, build, awaken without a single fucking priest required. So what do you do when someone holds a key to the true power of sound and symbol? You bury them. You steal from their culture, twist it into something unrecognizable, slap a Latin name on it, and teach it to your priest class as the holy tongue. Then you say, only we can read the Bible, only we can speak to God, only we can decide what is truth. But it's all a house of mirrors. These priests, they don't even know what they're channeling. They're learning a man-made cipher, believing it's divine, reciting rituals in a stitched-together tongue invented in back rooms by men in robes and rings, while the real language of the earth sleeps beneath their feet. This is how secret societies work. The left hand builds a system. The right hand enforces it. The mouth speaks it. The head doesn't even care if it's real. It just wants control. And Latin is just one more layer of the spell, a fabricated frequency dressed up in reverence to replace the living language of light. Next up, scandals of the holy, saints, sins, and the performance of purity. All right, family, let's go there. Because if you're still clinging to the idea that religion equals morality, if you're still under the spell that holy people are good people, it's time to snap out of it. The truth is brutal. But the truth is better than fucking betrayal. Because when you know, you can finally heal. So let's talk about the scandals of the holy. Let's talk about what happens when you create a system where ego gets a costume and power gets a pulpit. You want to know what you get? You get rape. You get lies. You get manipulation so deep it wears a halo. Let's start with the Catholic Church, because it's the easiest example. A global network of sexual abuse spanning decades. Hidden, protected, paid off. And still, they preach abstinence. These men take vows of chastity while molesting children behind locked doors. And you want to tell me these are the stewards of divine wisdom? They're not priests. They're predators in priest costumes. And it's not just the Catholics. Buddhist monks caught trafficking women, evangelical leaders preaching family values while cheating, stealing, and abusing, gurus groping under the guise of Kundalini activation, rabbis selling miracles, imams abusing their students, Mother Teresa, yes, her too. She became a brand, but behind the sainthood were clinics of pain, starvation, and deliberate suffering, not to heal the poor, but to glorify their struggle. She partnered with the worst of the worst, sex traffickers, dictators. You don't get that much money and that much fame without playing ball with the devil. And here's what I want you to understand. These scandals are not glitches. They are the natural consequence of a system that rewards spiritual performance over spiritual presence. When you put people on a pedestal, when you teach them they are closer to God than the rest of us, when you tell them they are beyond reproach, you build monsters. Not because they're born evil, but because they forget they're human. And when everyone around you bows, you start to believe your own mythology. You justify the abuse. You spiritualize the manipulation. It's for their growth. I'm doing God's work. No. You're feeding your ego and calling it love. And what happens to people caught in their orbit? They get broken. They lose faith, not just in the institution, but in God. And that's the greatest crime of all. Because these wolves in robes aren't just stealing money or innocence. They're blocking the path home, making people believe that God must be corrupt too. And he's not. He never was. The corruption was never in the source. It was in the system that claimed to own him. Now, as a little diversion real quick, I got a part 4.5 that I want to chat about. Glimpses into the forbidden. Trailheads to truth. Before we go deeper into the next level of tampering, I want to slow down for just a second because I mentioned some names that might have flown right over your head, and I don't want to leave anyone behind. These are not throwaway references. These are breadcrumbs. Each one of these has cracked someone's life wide open. Each one is its own rabbit hole with its own fire to light. So let me just give you a taste. Not the whole enchilada, just enough to get your compass spinning. Let's start with the book of Enoch. The book of Enoch is pre-flood scripture, left out of your Bible on purpose. It talks about angels coming to earth, mating with humans, teaching forbidden knowledge, and a coming judgment. It was widely accepted in early Christianity, quoted directly in the book of Jude. So why remove it? Because it exposes too much. It names the Watchers, the Nephilim, and hints that humanity is more than it's been told. This one book could have blown up the control system of modern religion. So they buried it. How about the Gnostic Gospels? The Gnostics believe something dangerous, that God lives within you. I believe that too. They saw Jesus not as a sacrifice, but a teacher of awakening. They didn't need a church. They didn't need priests. They knew the kingdom was inside. And what happened? They were declared heretics. Their texts burned. Only a handful survived, buried in jars in Egypt until 1945. You want to feel truth hit your spine? Read the Gospel of Thomas and tell me why it's not in your Bible. How about Babylon and Sumer? The OG civilizations. Before Rome, before Greece, before Egypt, there was Sumer, Babylon, Akkad. I think that's how you pronounce it. They gave us writing, math, astronomy, and, a full-blown alien contact scenario. Their tablets speak of the Anunnaki, sky beings, genetic manipulation, flood myths, Eden myths, resurrection gods, all start here. But most of those tablets are in museum basements, and the translations we get, heavily sanitized. Because if we saw what they really said, we'd start to question everything we think we know. How about Tartaria? This one's a bomb. Tartaria was a massive global civilization that existed far more recently than we're told. You've seen all those flags where they're standing on the head of some animal, showing their dominance over a past civilization, a past culture. History books have been rewritten. That's why the quotes say, history is written by the victors. And the only evidence remains in symbols on flags and shit like that. What evidence do I have? Dude, it's everywhere. Just relabeled. Advanced architecture, free energy systems, star forts, cities with impossible design for the time period. What we call colonial or Victorian in style, a lot of it may be repurposed Tartarian tech. I believe basically all of it is. And why erase them? Because if they were running a peaceful, advanced, and spiritual culture, it makes the modern empire look like a downgrade, which it is. We didn't evolve. We were reset. Finally, how about Mu, aka Lemuria? Before Atlantis, there was Mu, a continent, yes, continent, that supposedly existed in the Pacific. Polynesian, Hindu, and even Native American traditions speak of a sunken land where great beings once lived in harmony with earth and sky. Some say Mu held the feminine wisdom stream, the heart-based spiritual frequency wiped out by patriarchal conquest. You want to know where our real soul memory went? Start looking where everything got drowned. These are the missing chapters, my friend. Not just in religion, in humanity's operating manual. And the more you read them, the more you'll start to see the pattern. Anything that awakens the soul, anything that decentralizes power, anything that activates you is silenced, hidden, burned, discredited, or turned into a fairy tale. So follow the trail if your gut says yes. These aren't myths. They're banned truths. And they're waking back up. Part 5. Symbols, secrets, and the Masonic veil. The tampering is in plain sight. By now, you're probably starting to figure it out. The deception isn't hidden. It's branded. It's televised. It's carved in stone and stamped on the dollar. Welcome to the part of the show where we decode the tampering in plain sight. Let's talk symbols. Let's talk secrecy. Let's talk about the Freemasons. Because once you start to see the pattern, you see it everywhere. Every so-called elite institution, NASA, the Vatican, the UN, Ivy League universities, global banks, even Hollywood studios. They all use the same ancient language. Symbology. Why? Because symbols bypass the conscious mind. They don't ask for permission. They speak to the subconscious. They plant seeds. And who's been in charge of those symbols for centuries? The Masons, the so-called builders. But what were they building? A false version of reality. That's what. One rooted in sacred geometry, yes, but used not to enlighten, but to enslave. Think I'm being dramatic? Look at the V. You ever notice how every NASA mission patch contains the same exact V vector symbol? It's not just a design. It's Masonic. It's the compass, the square. It's the symbolic architecture of the lodge itself. And what is NASA but the new high priests of the modern mythos? Selling you the firmament, repackaged in pixels and jet fuel. All the early astronauts, and I mean all of them, Masons. All the key astronomers that Western astrology is built on, and I fucking mean all of them, Masons. All part of a fucking secret society. How do we trust them? How do we trust their information? How do you trust people representing a country when their first sworn allegiance is to a secret order? Now, not all of them knew the full picture, but that's how secret orders work. The initiates only know their layer. The mouth speaks the spell, not knowing who wrote it. The painter draws the symbol, not knowing what it activates. The hand carves the stone, but only the head sees the design. And what's the result? A reality covered in sacred shapes, but weaponized. What should have been used to align the soul with truth has been used to brand us with illusions. Corporate logos, government buildings, monument placement. It's not just design, it's spellcraft. And what's the point of it all? The point is to keep you asleep, to keep the world humming at a false frequency, so the people who built this prison can call it a palace. But here's the thing about symbols. They're not evil. They're tools. And once you wake up, you don't have to fear them. You reclaim them. You break the false spell, and you write a new one. One rooted in truth. One rooted in freedom. One rooted in direct connection to the divine. No lodge required. No gatekeeper needed. No robe, no title, no hidden handshake. Just you and the light that never needed a permission slip. And let me just say, you can find the teachings of the Masons. There are wonderful people, wonderful former adepts of these societies, in all of the fucking societies, who have come out, revealed the secret teachings. No need to join up. No need to wait and climb the hierarchy. They will tell you what is being taught. I've spent a long time researching that information. Some of the first things that I started to research when I was invited to join the Freemasons and the Illuminati, and I realized that it was true. I would just direct you straight back to the early episodes of our show on the Hermetic principles and universal law. That's basically what they teach. Before we move on from this section, I want to dive into a subsection about the dollar, the District of Columbia, and the divine deception. Let's stop pretending the United States of America is just a country. It's not. It's a fucking ritual, a living spell. And if you want to know who cast it, just look at your money. Look at the back of a dollar bill. The all-seeing eye staring right at you, floating above an unfinished pyramid, 13 layers high. Latin phrases like annuit coptis and novus ordo seclorum. Translation: our enterprise is approved. I repeat, our enterprise is approved. Quote, new order of the ages. And there will be a new world order. New order of the ages. Sounds a little less patriotic now, huh? And make no mistake, I consider myself a patriot. What we have been sold as America, what America is supposed to represent, is an ideal worth fighting for. But the underpinnings, the truth of the reality underneath it, are not that. And we must uproot all of the poison at the root of America if we ever hope to be the thing that we claim to be, that we like to think we are. So who's approving this enterprise anyway? The eye of providence, which is not the God of love, not the God of grace. It's the God of surveillance, of hierarchy, of control, of the pyramid scheme. That's not Yahweh. That's Enlil, Marduk, Baal, Saturn, the Old Testament God, thou shalt not know. Whatever mask they wear today, it's the same energy. Command from the top down. And where does all this symbolism point back to? Freemasonry! Ding, 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 ding. You got it. Washington, D.C., it's not a city. It's a sacred Masonic grid system. Go look at a fucking map. You've already seen the pentagram etched into the streets. That's real. I'm sure you can find it online with a quick Google search. But look closer. The Capitol, it's built to mimic Solomon's Temple. The Washington Monument is a phallus, an Egyptian obelisk that casts its long shadow over a city built on ritual geometry. And what sits directly across from the obelisk? A reflecting pool, because every spell needs its mirror. Even the street layout between the Capitol, the White House, and the Washington Monument forms an inverted Masonic square and compass. These are not coincidences. The Founding Fathers weren't just patriots. They were initiates, high-ranking members of the craft. Witchcraft. Not witchcraft were they a part of, witchcraft. Although you might call them warlocks. And they weren't fucking hiding it either. They branded it into everything, from your government buildings to your currency to your public rituals. Even the inauguration isn't a civic duty. It's a Masonic coronation done on specific days aligned with astrological power nodes. Why do you think the eagle on the Great Seal holds 13 arrows, 13 olive leaves, 13 stars, 13 stripes, 13 everywhere? The number of God, which this system has demonized as being bad, because they don't want you to hold that power. It ain't a baker's dozen, and that's on purpose. 13, a numerological frequency key. The number of the rebelling tribes, the number of transformation, the number they hijacked to anchor their version of the new world. And here's the kicker. We use this money every single day. We fold it, we pass it, we trade our time, our energy, our life force for it, without ever realizing that the whole system is a Masonic liturgy. A sacrament of slavery dressed up like prosperity. And what happens when you speak out about this? You're called a conspiracy theorist. But bro, it's right there. In your wallet, in your government, in your maps, in your monuments. Conspiracy theorist. This whole thing isn't just political. It's esoteric warfare. And knowing this doesn't make you crazy. It makes you conscious. You're not in the land of the free. You're in the center of the spell. And now that you've seen the symbols, you can start to rewrite the script. All right. Part 6 is our final part before I close us out. I called it Kill the Competition, the Holy War Against Inconvenient Truths. Let's be real. If religion was truly about truth, there'd be room for more than one version of it. But that's not what happened. What happened is this. They picked a favorite. Then they burned the rest. This wasn't just spiritual selection. This was a hostile takeover. A coordinated, centuries-long campaign to destroy any system that threatened the monopoly. Because the truth doesn't need defending. Let me say that one more time for those in the back. The truth doesn't need defending. But lies need a whole army to defend. Let's look at the pattern. Mithraism, killed off by early Christianity. Why? Mithras was born on December 25th, had 12 disciples, performed miracles, died, resurrected, and promised salvation. Sound familiar? He couldn't exist alongside the Jesus story. So they wiped him out. I always fucking feel like I'm mispronouncing this word. Zoroastrianism? Zoroastrianism. It's one of the oldest known religions. Dualistic, cosmic, rooted in moral choice. It gave us the idea of heaven and hell. But try finding a Zoroastrian temple today. They were erased from the West because they held the original blueprint. And the newer systems didn't want you seeing what they copied. How about Norse beliefs? The Aesir, the Vanir, runes, tree of life, Odin hanging from another one, Yggdrasil to gain wisdom, another dying god archetype. These weren't savage myths. They were sacred science disguised as legend. But Christianity labeled them pagans and demonized their entire worldview. Or Gnosticism, a spiritual bombshell, if ever there was one. Jesus not as the Savior, but the mirror? God not as a judging king, but an inner light? The demiurge exposed. The illusion of this world laid bare. The Gnostics said, "You don't need a church. You are the temple." And for that, they were hunted, tortured, silenced. Are you seeing the pattern yet? It's not about who's right. It's about who's useful. The religions we were allowed to keep, the ones we're still hearing about 2,000 years later, they weren't preserved because they were true. They were sponsored, funded, weaponized. And when one of them grew inconvenient to the empire, it was broken into smaller pieces. Protestant versus Catholic, Sunni versus Shia, Mahayana versus Theravada. Divide and conquer. Every time. It's so easy. It's happening now in a world mostly devoid of religion. Men versus women, gays versus straights, black versus white. Divide and conquer. So who's right? Who has it figured out? Maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the question is, what was so powerful, so beautiful, so activating that they had to kill it for them to survive? Because let me tell you something, the truth doesn't go away. The truth goes underground. The truth hides in symbols, in story, in your very own DNA. And when the time is right, the truth returns, not as dogma, not as doctrine, but as a voice inside you that says, I remember. That shiver up your spine, that inner knowing, this is right. I've heard this before. I've known this before. I don't know. I just know. I feel it in my bones. And that's where we are now. The remembrance has begun. And they can't kill it this time. Because this time, it's you. All right, guys. Let's wrap this up. Because the veil is torn and you're free. Now you know. Not just the details, not just the symbols, not just the names of the gods they tried to erase. And there are more. But you know the shape of the lie. You know the tone of this deception. And more importantly, you know what it feels like when truth hits the bones. The veil, it's not out there anymore. It's not in the Vatican. It's not in the vaults. It's not hidden in Latin or locked behind paywalls or rituals or robes. The veil is inside you. And if you're still clinging to it, it's because you're afraid of what happens when it's gone. Because when it is gone, there's no more priest, no more middleman, no more excuse. It's just you. You and the universe. You and the God that never needed an interpreter. You and the memory that you are and always were, a divine being. So I'm not here to convert you. I'm not here to sell you a new dogma. I'm here to return you to yourself, to wake up the part of you that always knew, that whispered in the back of the church, that shook when the preacher lied, that blinked when the all-seeing eye looked back at you from your own fucking wallet. That part of you was never confused. It was just waiting for the moment to say, no more. So this is it. You don't need their robes. You don't need their permission. You don't need their language, their translations, their temples, their chains. You are the temple. You are the flame. You are the scroll that was never burned. And now, you are free. This has been everything they don't want you to know. I'm Jesse Blaze Snider, and you just stepped out of the pyramid. If you love myth and entertainment like I do, make sure you're tuning into my other podcast, Coolest Geek Alive, dropping every Wednesday and Saturday. If you're into music, and you damn well should be, my show, All Your Favorite Bands Suck, is still live everywhere except Spotify. We got kicked off. Badge of honor. And that show is coming back soon. Louder and sharper than ever. There are also 2 big campaigns you can sign up for notifications right now at Kickstarter. One for Sugar and Bones magazine, a mythic, sexy, comic-fueled cultural bomb we've been cooking up for years now. And one for my 9-album Masterworks USB box set that launches on the 26th. It's a complete archive of my entire music career with rare tracks, physical releases, and other collector-level goodies. You can follow me on social media, but honestly, I barely post anymore. I'm not here to chase algorithms. I'm here to burn lies down and build legends up. If you're going to go find me on Facebook, my personal page, not the professional page. If you're still there before I hit 5,000, you're the lucky one. And if you actually want to reach me for real, email me, old school, direct, jesseblaze@jessesnider.com. And I hope you'll join me next Monday for another fucking mind-blowing episode of Everything They Do Not Want You to Know. Later. Care Bear Stare.
There's something in the water. There's something in the air. The proof is all around us. It's not a matter of time. Sure as the blaze in your eyes. I sense a subtle shift. Instincts I can't resist. Weary of wolves in disguise.